Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for your kindness in spending your time attending our presentation session. And in this occasion, we would like to convey, to present our ideas on how to classify the risk when a conventional supply chain intends to transform into sustainable supply chain. This kind of work was produced from collaboration between me, coming from Ratulangi University in Indonesia, with Professor Vikas Kumar, which has affiliation with the University of the West of England in Bristol, United Kingdom. And in the few minutes ahead, I would like to present our idea on typology of risk when a typical conventional supply chain transforming into the sustainable one. And we also would like to present a kind of proposal on how we should rank those critical risks to help decision maker allotting their limited resources to select the most critical one for the alleviation. So this presentation is split into three sections. In the first, we would like to present the rationale, the motivation, why we should have to undertake the study. And then in the second section, we would like to present to you on taxonomy, on classification of risk, any factors affecting negatively when we are trying to implement sustainable supply chain from the conventional supply chains. And in the last part of the presentation, we would like to propose to you a kind of conceptual model on how we should rank the critical transformation supply chain using a model we borrow from the failure mode and effect analysis. Okay, let's enter further. This is the motivation we have to undertake the study. At first, it is becoming the norm today that by implementing a sustainable supply chain, when we are trying to undertake business with partners, we will obtain many benefits. We are more care on human issue. We try to paying attention to the environment, to the society, and while we try to optimize the economic activities to obtain profit. And then the attention on studies to manage supply chain sustainably has already mentioned by many scholars, Asian Sursi, Panigeri, and many other scholars. But while a lot of studies has been devoted to dig into the supply chain sustainability, there are very few efforts has been dedicated to prevent the negative uncertainties, the risk when a conventional supply chain trying to transform into the sustainable one. So, in our opinion, preventing the occurrence of risk in changing, in transforming from conventional into sustainable supply chain is very important. For what? For avoiding failure in transforming into sustainable supply chain. This is the motivation why we have to dig more on the transforming conventional into sustainable supply chain. Then we have tried to do our best on finding previous studies dealing with review on supply chain risk management. In the last 8 years, started by Gatke et al. On 2012, they have tried to synthesize supply chain risk management methodologies between 2003 until 2010, and then in this year, Cow et al. Has also reviewed the empirical supply chain risk management research between 2004 until 2017. And so we conclude that many works have been devoted to dig on supply chain risk management issue in supply chain risk management discipline. And then when we are trying to focus more on supply chain sustainable risk assessment, we have obtained the result like this one. Uh, Previous research has utilized many methods like autopsies, like critics, like using Dematel to find the most critical sustainability risk, and they have also tried to rank which one is becoming the most critical sustainability risk using many methods. And in this year also, the Iranian scholar Zdeh and Sohyar attempt to include inclusion of information technology dimension when we are trying to assess supply chain sustainability risk. In short, we may say that so many efforts have been presented to deal with sustainability risk prioritization issue in supply chain discipline. However, it is surprising to see that according to Vishnu et al., they indicate on scarcity of studies on managing risks in transforming conventional into sustainable supply chain. So as we can see in earlier section, many studies have been presented to deal with sustainability risk assessment, but specific studies on how to deal with the risk in transforming into conventional into sustainable supply chain is missing. So departing from this indication, there are three inquiries that we want to propose to you. At first, what are the typical risks in transforming conventional supply chain? And then the second one is what are relevant parameters in evaluating, in ranking criticality of risk when conventional supply chain is changed into the sustainable one. And then what is the relevant decision support model that we can use, we are considering to use when we have to opt to select the most critical transformation risk. There are three inquiries, three questions that we would like to answer in this presentation session. Okay, in order to find the answer of the questions, we try to find using literature survey. We are using strings like this one: sustainable supply chain risk, risk in transforming into sustainable supply chain, And we are using three reference databases: the Emerald, Science Direct, Science, and Wiley and Sons. And the findings are categorized into the three sections. First, taxonomy of transformation risk. Then the parameters we would like to see use in appraising the impact of transformation risk, and then decision support model for ranking the risk, the critical risk. This is the finding of our survey. There are a lot of risk that we have to be considered when we are attempting to change from the conventional into sustainable supply chain. At first, is classified into the leadership risk. In this risk dimension, the example of the risk element is like lack of top management commitment and proactivity in chasing the sustainability, and also no sense of urgency on sustainability. And then we also observe that financial issue is affecting to the success in transforming into the sustainable supply chain. For example, we have to deal with the uncertainty on the investment costs in implementing the sustainable supply chain practice. And also, we have also to deal with knowledge risk. For example, lack of knowledge workers on implementing the sustainable supply chain is a kind of issue when we are trying to transform the conventional into the sustainable supply chain. And next, we also have to deal with intra-organizational information sharing and its quality when we are trying to transform into the sustainable supply chain. And then, while we are considering managerial, economical, financial, operational, we have also considered many other risk dimensions like behavioral relationship risk, the readiness of the suppliers in implementing the sustainability, and also what kind of the support obtained from the government on the endeavor we have proposed changing into the sustainable supply chain. And then we are trying to focus now on parameters. What are parameters? What are criteria we can use in ranking critical transformation risk? We are trying to borrow this parameter from the well-known risk assessment method, the failure mode and effect analysis. In failure mode and effect analysis, we are usually accustomed with three parameters: the occurrence of risk, the detectability of the risk, and then the severity of the risk impact. In similarly way, we are trying to propose four parameters in ranking the critical risks in transforming into the sustainable supply chain. And the first parameter is the occurrence. This parameter relates with the likelihood of typical risk transformation factors will occur when we are changing into the sustainable supply chain. And then the second is readiness parameters. These parameters represent the readiness level when the conventional supply chain transform into the sustainable supply chain. And then the third parameter is flexibility. Flexibility must be considered since the transformation is identical with change, and changing when we are discussing about changing, we have to think about how we can accommodate uh, changes with our structure, with our financial, with our organization, and so on. So the flexibility becoming the third criteria in ranking risk factors. And then the fourth one is the adaptability. These last parameters represent supply chain capability to respond to the new condition due to transforming into the sustainable supply chains. So the first criteria, occurrence scale of transformation risk factors. This first parameter is very similar with occurrence scale in failure mode effect analysis. So in FMEA, we are usually using the frequency scale, in which the frequency scale can be obtained from statistical data if the data is available, if the historical data is available, and then if not, we can use expert judgment in estimating the scale of the occurrence of the transformation risk factors. And then the second one is the second criterion, supply chain flexibility. Supply chain flexibility, according to Sahu et al. In 2015, represent the attribute of supply chain indicating capability to fulfill all supply chain environmental needs. And then uh, this flexibility attribute is classified into the five types, ranging from supply chain networks flexibility, operation system flexibility, and ended with organizational design capability. The last one is dealing with uh, flexibility to accommodate the change in the relationship with the organizational structure of the enterprises. And then the readiness is becoming the third risk ranking criterion, in which the readiness factor here is consisting of suppliers readiness, is our suppliers ready, financial readiness factors, workers, process, leadership, and environment. And then the last parameters, supply chain adaptability. Supply chain adaptability is defined as the ability to respond to the new condition when transformation process occur. And then, in order to answer the third inquiries in this presentation, we present the equation to quantify the transformation risk using the terminology transformation risk priority score, or TRPS. As you can see in this equation, transformation risk priority score is obtained by multiplying the occurrence scale of the risk transformation risk factors multiplied with the flexibility scale of the transformation risk factors, and then multiplied again with readiness and adaptability scale. And in order to improve our understanding on what criteria we can use when we are trying to quantify the transformation race, we also presented the criteria and their numerical scale like this one, as you can see in the slides. Yeah. And then this is the general procedure to apprise criticality of transformation risk into supply chain. It's almost similar with failure mode and effect analysis, in which number one is the identification of transformation risk criteria in those factors, which the output was the conventional transformation criteria and risk factors. Last one is determining the appropriate transformation risk elevation method. This is the last of our presentation. We have found in our survey that investigation on managing transformation risk from conventional into sustainable is vacant in literature, and then we have presented a conceptual decision support model to select the most critical transformation risks. And then what becoming the opportunities for future studies are two uh, parts, two items. The first one is testing the validity and purpose on the conceptual model we have presented, and then we can also use the multi criteria decision making method like the HP, NP, TAPSIS, and etc. to improve the quality of our decision support model presented. That is all for our presentation, and thank you for your time to attend our presentation session. Thank you.